I've seen a number of YouTube videos recently that talk about the secret to perfect timing, like there is some secret that if only you knew this secret, presumably by clicking on the video and watching it, that you would have amazing timing and you would be able to crush modern forehands and backhands. When the reality is that timing is the hardest thing in tennis. It's what separates the higher level players from the lower level players. It is hard. And if you don't believe me, read Nadal's book, because Nadal is really, really good at tennis. And I love this quote from his book. He says, basically, you would think that I would have all of the basic shots of tennis sewn up because I've done it so many times, but I don't. And the reason I don't, and I have to really think about it, is because every single shot you ever play is different. You have to make tiny little adjustments with different parts of your body in order to be able to hit the ball back correctly. So what he's talking about there is how hard it is to time shots in tennis. And that's Nadal, one of the 3 greatest players of all time. He thinks that timing is hard. I also believe that timing is very hard. And it's something that I worked long and hard at to overcome my own problems, to develop a relatively high-level tennis game, initially with my right hand, and then I injured myself, and now with my left hand. I've had to learn how to fix my timing on my left hand as well. So what I want to do in this video is explain the process that I use to improve my timing, because hopefully that will help you as well. And hopefully you enjoy the video. If you do, it'd be awesome if you give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, it'd be much appreciated if you could do that as well. So we need to start by talking about what timing is. And really, timing's a combination of a couple of things. It's a combination of starting your swing at the right time relative to the ball that you're dealing with, and then sequencing your kinetic chain correctly so that you can create racket head speed efficiently and make contact with the ball in as ideal a position as possible relative to your body. So if I'm thinking about the forehand, I want to have used my kinetic chain properly. I've got to have started my swing at the right time so that I can drive through my hip, then my torso, then my arm's going to come through, and I've used all of the big muscles to create the racket head speed. So now it's mostly the racket traveling with kinetic energy and just a little bit of muscular effort as it makes contact with the ball. So all the hard work gets done initially, and now I make contact with the ball, and it creates a lot of power and spin because of the timing component, the timing of the sequence of the movements, and when I started the swing and when I made contact. Same thing on the forehand and the backhand, it just looks a little bit different. If I've got a one-hander, I'm still sequencing things in the same way. I'm driving through my hip, then my torso, then my arm and racket are coming through, hopefully making contact out in front, although it's not always possible. Sometimes your opponent just hits an amazing shot and you have to do what you have to do to be able to get the ball back. But when possible, the timing is going to be making contact with the ball out in front of the body, but the key part is the sequential motion and using your kinetic chain effectively. And that means there's really 2 variables involved. There's the ball, so the flight of the ball, how fast the ball is traveling, the spin that's on the ball, how the ball is going to react off the court, and then when you start your swing, and the swing speed and the swing path that you use. You obviously can't do anything to change what happens to the ball. Your opponent hits whatever shot they want to hit. You just have to be able to read it and predict it and understand what it means, because what you can control is when you start your swing and the sequencing of your kinetic chain and the speed that you swing, the speed that you swing at. So that is kind of timing and how to think about it. So what I want to do now is talk about how to improve each of the aspects that can be improved. So you can't do anything about the flight of the ball. Your opponent hits whatever shot they hit. Your job is to try and read the flight of the ball as quickly as you can to understand what the speed, the spin, the trajectory means, so that you can set up in the right position and start your swing at the right time and make the necessary adjustments. And that's a skill that you have to train very specifically. I'm going to talk in a moment about how I did that with my left hand. But something else that's going to be important is how your visual system is functioning. So you have the on-court skills training component, but you also need to have a visual system that functions well enough to enable you to train that skill. To help you with that, I've created a free Tennis Vision Starter program. I'll place a link to it up there, and I'll place a link to it down in the description, because most players' visual systems don't work well enough to allow them to read the ball well enough, and that's one of the big things that holds them back in terms of the timing. So now I want to explain how I fixed my timing or developed good timing with my left hand. Obviously the first part of it was improving my visual system, and I did some work on my coordination, but I'll talk about that in a moment. But then in terms of the on-court work, I did a lot of ball machine work. Obviously the hard thing is that every shot you deal with is different. You have to get used to reading the flight of the ball and then starting your swing at the right time and making the adjustments. So the way that I went about it was to kind of feed specific shots, and the difficulty I was having is that I was late on my shots, forehand and backhand, and this is the same problem that all players have. Nobody pretty much is too early on the shot. The issue is that players are too late. Because of that, they don't have time to sequence the kinetic chain properly, and they end up arming it and getting jammed. So that's basically the problem that we all have to fix. So what you need to think about is the timing of the start of your swing. So I'll demonstrate it right-handed just because most players are right-handed. You have to think about the timing of the start of your swing. Obviously you also have to be prepared and set up in time. I'm not going to go into the preparation too much here because I've got a lot of videos that talk about it. I'll link one in the description. But providing your setup in the right position in time, it's then when do you drive through your back hip? So if I'm hitting my forehand, when do I drive through my back hip to initiate the swing? If it's an open stance, it's the outside leg. When do I drive through my hip to initiate the swing? If I'm hitting a backhand, when do I drive through my hip to initiate the swing? And you have to time that based on the ball that you're dealing with. And the way that I had to think about it was feeding myself balls with a ball machine. So I would feed a certain type of feed with a certain length, certain amount of power, certain amount of spin, and then I would basically try and improve my timing for that type of feed. And normally I would start by hitting it late, and then I would have to think, okay, well, when am I starting my swing? What's happening to the ball? And I like to think of it in terms of, do I need to start the swing before the ball bounces, as the ball bounces, after the ball bounces? And that's going to change based on the ball that you're dealing with and the way that you're trying to hit it. So say I feed myself a low hard ball and initially I miss, or I'm a little bit late on my shot because I started my swing just as the ball was bouncing, which is a tip that you sometimes hear online. But I'm late. So I know that for this feed, I have to start it before the ball bounces. So I would do that over and over again, thinking about when to start the swing. So I'm watching the ball come, okay, it's about to bounce, start the swing, very consciously thinking through it until I fixed the problem with that particular feed. And maybe that would take me, one full ball machine's worth, and then I would move to the next option. So now maybe I'll feed it a little bit higher with more spin. So now it's bouncing up, and I would go through the same process again. So on this one, I would do what I initially did naturally at the start, and then, okay, am I late on that? Right, I need to start my swing earlier, so I was starting my swing at this point. Now I need to start my swing just after it bounces because the ball's coming up and back down. So I would work on that until I was able to do it with that ball. And then I would move to the next type of feed. So now maybe I'm working on an inside-out forehand, different type of spin, different flight of the ball, so I'm getting used to seeing them, and go through the exact same process again, thinking about when the ball is bouncing, where it's about to bounce, when do I need to drive through my outside hip. And I would work on that until I got that fairly clean. So I did that with single feeds to start with. So I've just got kind of one ball that I'm working on. And then when I got good at that, at lots of different feeds, and that was a process that took me about 2 years to do, then I would start to move, say about 18 months to do, then I would move to different feeds. So now instead of just feeding it there, I would have it feeding it randomly, but it's the same flight of ball and same spin. So I know how it's going to react off the court, but now I've just got to set up in a slightly different position each time. So that was my next progression. So I did that. And I kept on going at that, doing it over and over again until I got to the point where I was able to do it in rallies against real humans that were hitting the ball where they wanted to. But it took me about 2.5 years of practice, or maybe just over 2 years of practice of doing that repetition after repetition to be able to read the flight of the ball and to start the swing at the right time on my forehand in order to be able to get the timing to work. So that was a long explanation. Hopefully it made sense, but that was the process that I went through in terms of learning to read the flight of the ball and thinking about how to get the timing. So now we've dealt with the visual side of things. we've still got one huge variable and thing that's under your control, and that is going to be the speed of your swing and the swing path. And this is where things get tricky. As Nadal said, every single shot is different. You have to make adjustments on every single shot. So yes, you need to start your swing early enough or it's not going to happen, but then you need to be able to sequence your kinetic chain in the right order and adjust the swing path on the fly, because sometimes the ball takes a bad bounce and you just have to adjust for it. And that comes down to your degree of coordination. So for me, with my left hand, in addition to the on-court practice that I did, I've had to do a lot of work to improve my coordination so that I can use my kinetic chain effectively. So instead of going into that in detail in this video, I've made another video that's going to talk about how to train and improve coordination. So I'll place a link to that down in the description, because now I just want to talk about kind of some extra things to think about in terms of improving your timing. The final thing that I want to talk about when it comes to timing is you have to not allow yourself to believe that there's a right or wrong or a perfect way to do things. There isn't. Watch the pros play. There is a tremendous variety of technique. Timing is about finding what works for you based on your physical skill and ability level. So it's going to look a little bit different for everyone. For me, what I had to do to develop high-level timing on my right hand initially and then on my left hand was kind of abbreviate things a little bit from what you see some of the pros do. So when you watch Djokovic on his forehand, he does a full rotation all the way around and he's got amazing timing and it's dreamy. I can't do that. Lo and behold, I am not as good as Novak Djokovic. So for me, I can't get that full rotation, or I can't start my swing with my racket right the way back there. I think about my strokes a little bit more, bit more like Manarino. So I really kind of abbreviate it. I get a good unit turn with my upper body because you need that to create the biomechanics. But instead of having my arm there, which would allow me to get a little bit more power if I could time it, I have a very short take back and then just try and make good contact. So that was the same thing on my right hand, and I had to go through the same process with my left-handed forehand, just abbreviating it and going out from there and making a nice clean contact. And it's going to be exactly the same thing on your backhand. Like when you watch the pros, they've got a massive coil. If you've got a one-hander, they're dropping into the slot position with the racket pointing towards the back fence, and they're turning themselves into a whip. If you can do that, awesome, do it. But if you're having problems with your timing, you don't have to do that. It's much harder to time it with a massive coil. So maybe you just coil to 90 degrees, and instead of dropping into a slot position that's there, maybe you just drop it down into position there and hit through. And it's really important to understand that. You just have to find what works for you and do the best that you can with how your body functions at the moment. Don't listen to coaches when they say there's a secret to doing things. There's no secret. It is about methodical, consistent practice, finding the things that are holding you back, working on addressing them in a structural way, and using the most appropriate technique that you can for your current skill level. Okay, so hopefully this video made sense and has been useful to you. I would love any feedback or comments if you could leave them down in the comments section. I always like to read those. If you did find it helpful, give me that thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, it is much appreciated if you could do that as well.